The fabled Kingdom Hearts 3 is set to release sometime this year, and it's given me pause for reflection. As a 20-year-old college student, I'm in a state of disbelief. I'm a fully fledged adult. I have taxes to file, jobs to hunt for, a life to carve out for myself. Where did the time go? The days where I'd run around Traverse Town with my rented copy of Kingdom Hearts from Blockbuster, back when it still existed. It's hard not to feel melancholic as I watch each year pass me by, vestiges of my youth torn down one by one, only to be reassured that this dumb monolithic series is still going strong. Say what you will about its overall quality, we have an unbreakable bond that formed in the early years of elementary school that stuck with me through my darker prepubescent phase, rode with me through the best of my high school years, and is currently struggling with me through the pit of the unknown that is adulthood. Maybe it sounds silly, but I do not know where I'd be today if it weren't for this goofy Keyblade wielder and his eclectic group of friends. Join me as I figure out why this Final Fantasy Disney crossover about the power of friendship has such a powerful hold on my very being. You might call it a Kingdom Hearts retrospective. I will be playing the Kingdom Hearts HD 1.5 plus 2.5 remix on PS4. 1080p, 60 FPS, every final mix version, the best kind of remaster, all in one simple to digest package. Unlike other retrospectives I've done, this is pretty clearly the definitive version of the Kingdom Hearts series, at least for the main games. For Dream Drop Distance, I'll be using the Kingdom Hearts HD 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue. Oh boy, to play the HD remaster also in 1080p and 60 FPS. For the rest, I guess I'll just need to play the originals. That means for the 2DS titles, I'll either be emulating or purchasing off the black market. In terms of video release order, I've opted to stick to the order of release instead of the order presented in the HD remaster. Not that there's a huge difference, just swap Kingdom Hearts 2 and 358, there you go. We're on track. We start with none other than Kingdom Hearts, released originally for the PlayStation 2 in 2002, the result of a chance meeting between a Square and Disney executive in the elevator of the building they worked in. First-time director Tetsuya Nomura helmed the project with the intentions of making a game with the freedom of movement in 3 dimensions like Super Mario 64. So we get a command menu styled after the menu of the turn-based Final Fantasy series, injected into a 3D action RPG combat system custom fit with dodge rolls, combos, invincibility frames, and an involved story fit for a Final Fantasy game with a simple, clean message to service its Disney roots. We follow the journey of Sora, Riku, and Kairi as they involuntarily set off from their homeworld, Destiny Islands, and are thrust into an end-of-the-world incursion by zombie-like beings known as the Heartless. Sora wields the legendary Keyblade, the only known weapon capable of defeating the Heartless and closing the opened keyholes in each world, with the caveat being that Sora travels with Donald and Goofy as party members who form a series-spanning bond searching for their respective friends and saving the universe several times. Surreal is a pretty tame word to use when describing the story setup, which is part of the reason it feels so unique and interesting to me. Using Disney worlds and characters as tools to develop Sora as a character, to have him experience a hero's journey, is such a fascinating take on an overdone trope. This could have just been Sora, Donald, and Goofy sightseeing at various Disney movie locales talking to iconic characters, but it's so much more than that. Tetsuya Nomura decided to splice the Disney elements into its Final Fantasy DNA. Rather than a bunch of disconnected romps through Disney worlds, it's more like the Disney universe of films and the Final Fantasy realm of characters merged together into a cohesive unit. Imagine a world where venturing into outer space means stumbling onto a Disney world, where characters respond to universe-shattering events in line with their established character motivations, and where evil figureheads naturally incorporate themselves into the larger narrative. Maleficent could have just been a one-off Disney villain who picked on Princess Aurora and Prince Philip, but in line with the logical direction of her character, she becomes a malevolent force of evil. She forms a rogues gallery of Disney villains to spread the Heartless to more and more worlds, she learns how to control said Heartless, and even woos a young and vulnerable Riku to her side as she drives a wedge between him and Sora. You could totally buy that Maleficent, the mistress of all evil, would respond to the Heartless by riding that wave of evil to suit her own desires. She works with the Final Fantasy villain, the one who created the Heartless out of his own unquenchable sense of curiosity. Ansem, Seeker of Darkness, is responsible for the destruction of so many different worlds, and you could totally buy that it would be the Sephiroth Kefka stand-in that would ultimately beat out the relatively simple Disney villains in terms of raw power. On the flip side, it stands to reason that Sora would get along really well with the heroes of those stories and fight alongside them. Characters still act logically within their own boundaries, of course. Jack Skellington is a bit aloof. He seems far more concerned with using the Heartless for Halloween than fighting them off. Peter Pan is as standoffish as usual, growing more comfortable with Sora as time goes on. Tarzan is just interested to meet new people. You even have genuine conflict between Sora and King Triton in Atlantica about how dangerous it is for the Keybearer to nonchalantly roam around each world as they're supposed to be separate. Characters like King Triton probably would know about keyholes and other worlds given his royal status. A kid like Sora probably would be a bad keybearer, meddling in the affairs of other worlds by virtue of being so excited to do that very thing. His weaknesses are even highlighted at Hollow Bastion when Riku steals the Keyblade from Sora, stealing away Donald and Goofy in the process, driving home that Sora is powerless without his friends. You run around with a wooden sword, ineffectual against the Heartless, forced to rely on Beast to do the fighting for you. Maybe it's a little on the nose, but it is a game designed for children to enjoy with themes that are applicable to all audiences. Themes that say you can do anything if you have friends to rely on, a theme that is still applicable to this day.
Although my heart may be weak, it's not alone. It's grown with each new experience, and it's found a home with all the friends I've made. I've become part of their heart just as they've become a part of mine. And if they think of me now and then, if they don't forget me, then our hearts will be one. I don't need a weapon. My friends are my power.
That's how Sora wrenches the Keyblade back. He chases after Donald, Goofy, and Riku. He doesn't give up on Riku, even after he's crushed by his allegiances. It doesn't stop Sora from trudging on to save his lifelong friend. It manages to capture the grandiose, world-ending stakes of a Final Fantasy story with the universal theming of a Disney movie, which is probably why it had such a wide appeal. Simple is not always bad. We may be sick of Chosen One stories, but Kingdom Hearts proves that it's a popular story trope for a reason. It provides the breathing room necessary for these characters to shine and stick in your hearts forever, as a kid, as a teen, as an adult. I can tell you that the relationship between Sora and Kairi is a relationship I've been following for my entire life, waiting to see its natural conclusion. Nomura drops in little hints at their budding romance, with the Paopu fruit mythology introduced in the first few hours becoming a symbol of their developing relationship. Sora and Kairi form their relationship by drawing their faces on the cave walls. Sora attempts to advance that relationship by drawing a hand extending a Paopu fruit before tragedy strikes and they're separated. Kairi doesn't get to see this drawing until after their bittersweet end-of-game exchange, to which she responds by extending her own hand, in essence, sharing a Paopu fruit. Having this be the final shot is beautiful. It shows that their destinies will be forever intertwined and that they'll
remain a part of each other's lives, no matter what.
Sora sacrifices himself to save Kairi at Hollow Bastion without a second thought, and Kairi returns the favor by protecting him moments later, again, without a second thought. How could you not root for the two people who are obviously meant to be together? Okay, I'm getting into dangerous territory with this pairing discussion. I need to stop before the Sora x Riku folks get mad at me. That said, I can clearly see why so many people get behind that pairing. Sora and Riku have their own little bromance going on throughout the games, and who's to say you're wrong for thinking they might have romantic feelings for each other? It's a perfectly valid reading into their relationship, one that I might not personally subscribe to, but is totally valid when you consider how close they are as people. That they've been best friends long before Kairi ever showed up on Destiny Islands, and that they arguably have more emotional scenes together. Who am I to say you're wrong for coming to that conclusion? They managed to tug at your heartstrings and carry you through a multi-game epic. Why do you think I've stuck with the series through its highs and lows? Its very embarrassing lows. The characters are just raw enough to invest me in their arcs, and as far as I'm concerned, this is a perfect origin story for them. They each get their moments to shine, they each learn valuable lessons throughout their adventures, and this is most definitely the game I'd have my child play to learn about the importance of forming long-lasting relationships. I also don't think Nomura gets enough credit as a director, specifically for the way in which he sets up the events of the story. The first act, if you will, is a brilliant way to introduce the central characters. Show a few days of the kids' daily routine on Destiny Islands, attempting to create what they think will be a robust wooden raft to whisk them away to faraway worlds, jumping over to Disney Castle intermittently so that Donald and Goofy can go set off in search of the Key Bearer at the behest of King Mickey. Thing is, Donald and Goofy leave for Traverse Town around the same time the Heartless invade Destiny Islands. This happens after Donald reads a letter from King Mickey about the worlds blinking out one by one, only to then have Destiny Islands succumb to darkness, show a scene with Donald and Goofy watching a star blink out of the sky, and immediately pan to Sora unconscious in an alleyway. This is a wonderful crescendo in and of itself, but Nomura goes on to show several scenes of Donald and Goofy narrowly missing Sora, all so that they can meet up at the climax of the world to fight the big armored Heartless. Think about how many different ways Nomura could have painted the opening moments. He could have just followed Sora and told the story of Donald and Goofy through backstory or an info dump. He could have skipped Destiny Islands entirely. He could have shown the Donald and Goofy bits in one uninterrupted block. Yet he chose to gradually mix the two perspectives until they became one. I even left out all the scenes that take place when Destiny Islands is falling, where Kairi seemingly disappears, but in the direction of Sora. Now, on your first time viewing, you may interpret this as a creepy way to portray Kairi's sudden disappearance, her ghastly visage flying at Sora unexpectedly. Though it also serves the function of foreshadowing the plot twist that Kairi's heart was inside Sora the entire time, which is why no one could figure out how to restore it. At the beginning, she literally went inside Sora, and the game flat out shows you this. It's the type of shot framing that would fly over your head, but you could legitimately figure out on your own after learning more about how the Heartless are created and the nature of hearts. It's this strong directorial influence that strings the game together structurally. The worlds that were selected to be in the original Kingdom Hearts were great picks for visually and mechanically varied gameplay. You'll go from the winding labyrinths of Wonderland, to the arena-style combat in Olympus Coliseum, to the uncharted expeditions in the deep jungle, to the aquatic wonderland that is Atlantica. Each world sees you doing different things. Sure, you're always fighting Heartless, that much is true. It's how you get around the world and the ways in which you progress that differ. Wonderland has you running around a labyrinth searching for evidence to satisfy the Queen of Hearts. Olympus Coliseum has you coming back periodically to participate in incrementally more challenging tournaments against Heartless and specialized boss fights. And Atlantica turns you into a sea creature to explore the depths of the sea, forcing you to adjust to an entirely new control scheme. It doesn't go off the deep end with introducing new gameplay concepts either. In fact, it even expands on the Atlantica control scheme against Captain Hook in Neverland, Chernobog in the End of the World, and the final phase of Ansem at the tail end. Everything you learn is valuable. Every type of boss fight, every movement ability, every twist on the core gameplay is essential. That doesn't mean each world has a riveting main quest progression. Deep Jungle is perhaps my least favorite world because it constantly bounces you back and forth between the camp and the treehouse until you're sick of doing the same platforming challenges over and over. Halloween Town only has one save point with only one way to reach Oogie Boogie and a one-way shortcut back to the city center. Deep Jungle does this as well, depending on how you jump off the treehouse, which is great for getting back to the camp or city center quickly, but also means that to get back, you need to trek a fairly long distance and fight the same Heartless over and over. This is a particularly glaring issue when going after the secret Heartless that appear in those two locations, where you'll be running back and forth near eternally to get your synthesis drops, wishing you just had a two-way road to take so you didn't have to keep activating that swirly moon hill. Thankfully, the level design somewhat saves that main quest progression by providing suitable distractions from that mundanity. Going off the beaten path and doing some platforming will net you gummy pieces, equipment, synthesis items, and a host of other useful extras to reward you for going out of your way to explore. As much as I dislike running through Deep Jungle, I do like platforming across these hippos to reach this chest on a tall lily pad, or climbing Tarzan's treehouse for the time-stopped mushroom Heartless. I even like to explore Atlantica because it's such a different world design from the rest of the game. You're forced to think laterally for secrets, and the progression is more of a ring rather than a linear track. It even has a two-way shortcut from Ariel's Grotto to the sunken ship, which is why I'm so baffled it wasn't implemented in every other world. At the very least, none of them are overwhelmingly huge, so it prevents worlds like Agrabah, which is largely one linear track, from feeling as intrusive as it otherwise could have been. Not to say there aren't plenty of secrets strung along that hallway, and I mean a ton of them. They managed to make the Cave of Wonders feel like a Cave of Wonders, with treasure around every corner. I love it. It's a really simple structure, but Kingdom Hearts champions simplicity in a really relaxing way. The combat is underwhelming if you've played 2, but as a first for the series, it's admirable. First few hours are, well, they don't play out as masterfully as the story. You only really have access to your basic 3-hit combo triggered by pressing the X button a million times. As you level up and gain new abilities, new magic spells, new summons, the combat opens up a bit. Special moves like Ars Arcanum or Strike Raid are flashy limit breaks, and magic allows you to switch up your combat strategies. Different Heartless encourage different methods of play. For instance, the Fat Heartless can't be physically attacked from the front, so you can either struggle your way behind it, or you can cast magic instead. Aerial enemies play it a bit too fast and loose, so you may want to fall back on your Thunder spell to deal with them. When all else fails, you can add combo finishers onto your basic combo to make them much more effective. All of a sudden, you'll be doing flips in the air, shooting light out of your Keyblade, and zipping across the room like a Keyblade ninja. I'm really torn on the actual gameplay on offer here because it fluctuates rapidly between incredibly fun and challenging to mindless hack and slash on a surprisingly frequent basis. Heartless are visually and mechanically distinct from one another, so it's not as if you can button mash and beat the game. There's at least some thought that goes into every fight. However, the majority of them can be defeated with simple combos. A lot of that mechanical satisfaction comes from dodging the enemy. It's always visually exciting to flip around the room, but you gotta keep in mind that all you're doing is pressing the X button. Look at this room in the End of the World, the one before Ansem where they throw hordes of high-level Heartless at you. The challenge here isn't in what I'm doing to them. At some point I realized that I couldn't rip my thumb away from the X button due to my prolonged rhythmic tapping. Instead, I was concerned with dodging the Ring of Darkness from the Swordsman, the randomly appearing dark balls, these strange angelic tubes that send balls of light everywhere. I have my mind on my MP, my cure ability, my dodge roll, my jump, and a precise sense of timing, all while I just smash the X button in between. This room in particular highlights another issue I have with the overall combat structure. Some fights just take too long. Oogie Boogie has an interesting concept for a boss fight where he rolls a set of dice to decide which torture devices he'll throw at you next, and I really like that concept. The problem is that your only window to attack him is very short and very situational. He'll decide when you can jump on the flashing button to trap him, he'll decide when to push you off and force you to wait around for the next opportunity to hit him maybe 6 more times. Jafar is a maddening test of endurance in both phases, one where he constantly teleports around the room as you reach him, goading you at every turn, prolonging the fight well past where it needed to be, only to then fight Genie Jafar where the only threat to your health bar is the slow-moving flame ball he throws at you in an effort to distract you from chasing Iago and spamming the X button a bunch. Unless you can't reach him, and then you wait some more. Super fun boss design. Unfortunately, this sometimes extends to optional bosses, which I was looking forward to fighting after years of watching scattered clips. The Phantom, Kurt Zisa, the Ice Titan, they all looked really fun. Well, they're interesting concepts, at least. The one that disappointed me the most was the Phantom. I tried fighting this thing when I was a kid, but I was... let's just say I was a pretty dumb kid. It also scared me half to death. Seriously, nothing else here looks this scary, at least to a child. Years later, I was expecting something challenging, but it's far from that. Sure, if you don't know that you can cast Stop on the clock to stop the Doom counter, you'll have a pretty rough time, but not against the boss itself. It can either swipe at you or shoot a ball of energy at you that will drain your health bar for a bit. Except I learned on a whim that if you shoot over to the side of the clock tower, you can dodge this burst of energy every time, without fail, no matter how long it takes to get over there. He'll keep charging away, and the telegraph for this attack is super obvious. He floats in the same position every time. It won't prove to be a threat. So really, all this boss amounts to when you know what you're doing is to cast magic or physical attacks depending on the color of its core, fly in the other direction when he doesn't have a core, wait a sometimes ungodly amount of time for his core to reappear, and hope that your party members don't steal your physical attacks from you and delay it even further. Problem number 1. This gets old real fast. Problem number 2. He has a huge health bar. Problem number 3. If you run out of ethers or elixirs, all you can really do is wait to die because he only sometimes has a white core you can hit with physical attacks, and the only way to regenerate MP is to hit the boss with a physical attack. MP is needed to both damage the boss and stop the Doom counter. In other words, no MP, you may as well die. Because he takes so long to defeat, and because you'll be casting magic so damn often, if you don't have the items to survive the endurance battle, you're done for. He can hit you, sure, but he'll never stun lock you. His only damaging physical attack is one swipe that probably won't be lethal, and you can heal up on the spot. The most this does is drain your MP and end the fight a tiny bit quicker if you aren't prepared. The act of fighting this boss is monotonous, and it's a damn shame because a fight revolving around the use of magic is an interesting one. It isn't just that you run out of MP easily though. Kurt Sisa provides a solution to this problem, sometimes requiring the use of magic to damage him, but always dropping MP orbs when you physically attack him. The Phantom could have done the same thing, but I don't really think this would fix the boss itself, only the potentially frustrating failure state. All this boss boils down to is Simon Says, and it may take a while to learn that the colors correspond to magic attacks, but if you're familiar with this game at all and experiment, you'll figure it out in no time. The clock is a separate issue. I didn't even know you could stop it until someone told me, but again, the Doom counter is not necessarily a boss fixer. If you don't know that stop is useful here, your party members will die, then you'll die, one by one. I have no doubt people have successfully defeated the Phantom without altering the Doom counter, but they're probably much higher level than the game expects and are familiar with the game's mechanics to the point that you could just consider it a challenge run anyway. Essentially, the challenge of this boss is to figure out how to stop the Doom counter and damage him. And one of those is nigh essential for you to achieve victory in the first place. When you boil this fight down, you struggle to figure out how to defeat the boss, you figure it out eventually, then you're in for the long, repetitive, monotonous haul. That isn't a compelling fight to me. I mentioned Kurt Sisa, and while I'd take him over the Phantom, he also isn't what I'd call an impressive boss. The idea, again an interesting one, is to switch between physical and magic modes. This time you won't need items to defeat him, since he drops MP orbs when he's in his physically defensive state. While he has his 2 orbs exposed, you can only use physical attacks. He locks down your party's MP bars to force you into physically attacking, a much better telegraph. Yet, he falls into a similar trap. He only switches between 2 modes of attack, one where he flails his swords everywhere to prevent you from attacking his orbs, and one where he avoids you attacking from afar, prompting you to use magic. He can occasionally pull out a far more deadly set of attacks where he rolls either horizontally or vertically at you, and I will admit that these attacks are hard to avoid, but I still wouldn't consider them deadly if you're attentive with your arrow spells and rely on your cure spell to keep you alive. Though, I'll give this one props, higher difficulties and challenge runs will do this boss a lot of favors, and that's more than I can say about the Phantom. My favorite fights revolve around the tech point system. For parrying or performing specific actions, you'll gain bonus experience points. This is introduced and taught as early as Destiny Islands, where you can hit Wakka's ball back at him or parry sword swings from Tidus and Riku. Every time you go out of your way to do something potentially dangerous, you're rewarded for doing so. Instead of avoiding the big fireball from Cerberus, how about sending that ball back at him with a guard? It's far riskier to do so, but if you manage to pull it off, you'll do more damage to the boss, avoid taking damage, trigger special stuns, do extra damage to an enemy or boss if they're weak to a specific element, all while giving you bonus experience on the spot. This is a lovely partner to the MP restoration system I mentioned during the Phantom boss fight discussion, where you recover MP by getting more physical hits in on an enemy or boss, encouraging you to be more aggressive when you're more vulnerable in an effort to build up that safety net again. This is a beautiful set of systems that encourage you to get out of your comfort zone, a perfect risk-reward system in other words. Let's look at the difference between guarding an attack and rolling out of an attack, for instance. Your dodge roll will quickly become your best friend, as it's easy to pull out, will get you out of most situations, and is highly defensive. This is a perfectly viable defense strategy, however it is only a defense strategy. Guarding has a smaller defensive window, therefore requiring more dexterity, but is often rewarded by the tech point system. You can block attacks by virtually any enemy or boss, meaning that you always need to make the decision to be safe or risky depending on how fast you want to level up, or to potentially open up new opportunities to stop the enemy or boss from attacking you outright. This prevents the dodge roll from becoming an overpowered defensive strategy, while still allowing it to be an incredibly useful ability. The AP system is similarly brilliant, forcing you to balance which abilities you have equipped at a time as to not become too overpowered. Sometimes you'll need to sacrifice a helpful limit break like Ars Arcanum in order to equip a helpful defensive ability like Leaf Bracer. though you may decide that you're skilled enough to not require Leaf Bracer and choose Ars Arcanum for its offensive capabilities. Abilities are great for customization as well. While you can't outright D-level, you can equip or dequip specific very helpful abilities if you're looking for a challenge beyond the difficulty selections. Why do you think they added the no experience ability on higher difficulties? People clearly like to test their mastery, and it's created a healthy speedrunning community because of it. The best, most intense fights take full advantage of this system, namely the fights between Riku, Ansem, Dragon Maleficent, Hades, Cerberus. All of these fights have a lot in common despite their appearances and movesets being quite different. Riku is a straight up sword fight, mirroring the fight you had on Destiny Islands. You're both much more powerful, especially Riku, and you can take so many approaches to the duel. Guarding is still a viable strategy, especially if you have the counterattack ability equipped, allowing you not only tech points, but reliable follow-up damage. Yet my strategy was just as reliable and just as tense. Dodge rolling out of everything, only getting hits in when I was confident enough. It may have taken a tiny bit longer to deal with them, but that's okay because there was never a lull in the action. Riku's attacks are telegraphed really well, but not obnoxiously so. His sword swings come out fast and fierce, but there's always a way to react and dodge. The removal of Donald and Goofy are key to this tension, since you can't stock them full of healing items or rely on Donald's healing to survive. You have to manage it on your own. Sephiroth taps into this brilliance as well, even if I do think he goes a little overboard sometimes. His Flame Pillar attack comes out a little fast, easily trapping you, and his Omni Slash is hectic. I'm not saying he's unfair, that's far from what I'm saying. He's just a little too intense for me to ever fully enjoy. There's a method to his madness, of course. After 4 hits he'll teleport away, and after 7 hits he'll counter with a random attack. It's just that when that random attack is a Flame Pillar, I can't help but feel a little cheated. That said, there are countless no damage runs of Sephiroth on YouTube, so I really don't have much ground to say that he's outright unfair. He's certainly a great example of a difficult boss done right. However, the final secret boss added in Final Mix is unfair. The Enigmatic Man is a fantastic inclusion for his story link to Kingdom Hearts 2, but the design of the fight leaves much to be desired. His attacks are lightning fast, he throws them out with little to no warning. I haven't seen a single no damage run on YouTube that doesn't abuse the gravity tech point stun trick, meaning that there's pretty much no reliable way without stun locking him to avoid taking damage. That's not great design in my book. Theoretically, you should be able to dodge and react to everything a boss throws at you, even if each attack is randomly selected. Every swing, energy ball, command menu minigame should be well telegraphed and possible to avoid, but that just isn't the case here. I say this as someone who has beaten the Enigmatic Man, not as a salty, jilted lover beaten 6 ways to Sunday. The issue is that I beat him using the Tinkerbell summon along with spamming healing spells and items to make sure she never went away. She continually heals you until you die and then revives you as she disappears. You're damn right I abused this summon to tank his attacks and come out on top. As far as I'm concerned, the devs knew how horribly broken he was, and that's why Donald and Goofy are there with you. A pretty huge distinction from the fight with Sephiroth. He's far better than some of the ludicrously challenging fights later in the series, and I guess he is technically supposed to be the hardest end-all be-all boss in the entire game, so I'll let the frustration slide a little bit. Larger bosses can sometimes be just as unique as one-on-one encounters, though they also have the potential to be the most gimmicky. Dragon Maleficent is a great example. Her fire breath is avoidable, you can reflect some of her projectiles, jump over her shockwave stomps, and rush for the head when she's vulnerable. Her attacks are well telegraphed, and at this point in the game you have access to high jump and glide if you're really struggling to avoid her fire breath. Even without these abilities, it isn't impossible to make a larger boss that's still interesting. Cerberus is fought much earlier on, but he's just as compelling. You can get on his back with well-timed jumps, and if you're clever, you can stay on his back to avoid some of his most damaging attacks. If you're on the ground though, you can hit his fireballs back at him, the cost being that it isn't as easy to avoid the stomp attacks or darkness mines. Either way you slice it, the skill required from you is substantial enough for the entire boss to feel engaging and make use of the tech point system to boot. If you want an example of a less than stellar use of the tech point system and a boss fight in general, look no further than the Ice Titan. Much like Kurt Zisa and the Phantom, it's an interesting concept. A fight revolving around the specific tech point system that allows you to deflect projectiles back at enemies. The Ice Titan is so huge that your only recourse is to block his ice shards back at his head until he's stunned and falls to the ground. You're dealing continuous damage each time you reflect a projectile, so it isn't as if your damage window is too strict like it is with Oogie Boogie. However, it's much like the Phantom fight in that once you learn the pattern, it's far too repetitive. There's a lot more to avoid, and he ramps up his speed of attack in the later phases, remains stunned for a shorter amount of time, and overall feels much more aggressive. This is all great, but since your only method of attack is through guarding ice shots, no matter how much he throws at you, the fight devolves into a bunch of running around, jumping, and pressing the square button sometimes. Nothing more to it, unfortunately, but hey, it's better than the Rock Titan. I don't know why the iconic Hercules monster got gimped so hard, but it does present some interesting problems with larger enemies. Larger enemies need to be balanced around your abilities so that they don't feel too overpowered. Imagine if Cerberus was running and jumping around the room, biting you every step of the way. There's a reason he's designed to walk at a gingerly pace, shooting projectiles at you instead. Otherwise, it'd be far too fast for Sora's moveset to reasonably handle. The Rock Titan keeps this in mind to a fault. His attacks are unbearably slow, to the point where I unintentionally did a no damage run by aimlessly attacking his feet until he fell over, then jumping up to his head and doing the exact same thing. The problem here is that he has no means of recourse against you, and this wouldn't be a particularly huge issue if he wasn't the final fight in the Hades Cup, a cup that has bouts against Yuffie, Cloud, Leon, and Hades. The Behemoth is also in the Hades Cup, and he's another boss I'm not particularly fond of. He can do more than the Rock Titan, so in that sense he's a step up, but the problem is that the Behemoth is used far too often near endgame for how simple he is. Imagine the Cerberus fight copy-pasted with even less strategy around the tech point system. The end-all be-all strategy against the Behemoth is to jump on his back, much easier with the high jump ability, attack his horn a lot, attack his horn a lot, attack his horn a lot. I guess this disconnect can vary from player to player based on how much time you spend grinding, especially in the case of the secret bosses. Though you have a degree of choice as to what worlds you can travel to, each of them have difficulty stars to let you know which order you should ideally tackle them in. That way you have a pretty good idea when you're over or under leveled, and I never felt like I needed to grind at any point in the main story. Kingdom Hearts 1 avoids many of the pitfalls of JRPGs because it isn't necessarily a stat clash. As an action RPG, your skill can make any moment of your adventure. The stats only come into play to decide how quickly you or the boss will fall. After mastering the mechanics, I don't feel like there are any glaring difficulty spikes. Rather, I feel the early game is quite cruel to new players in general. Cerberus, if you aren't familiar with the tech point system or the dodge roll, is probably a royal pain in the ass. Hell, he was for me once upon a time. Ursula is tougher than she probably should be since you're grappling with an entirely new control scheme and lose access to most of your abilities in the process. Surely you could iron out a few of the details here and there, but I feel the entire game is balanced well, if not on the easy, boring side. Thinking about fights like Oogie Boogie and Jafar when I say that, because the endgame is sufficiently challenging with the Ursula-like Chernobog encounter and the multi-phase final fight with Ansem that tests everything you've learned up to that point. Ansem was so challenging to my younger self that I hadn't actually beaten the game until relatively recently, but I was also the kid who didn't realize I had abilities in KH1 or 2 because I never bothered to check my ability list. Imagine a playthrough of Kingdom Hearts without abilities. I wasn't the brightest kid. My point is that the main game is balanced well enough, but when you start jumping into the optional content, namely the bosses and synthesis, the lines are blurred quite a lot. Remember when I dunked on Kurt Zisa? Well, I was somewhere in the early 70s range when I fought him, which might be a tad higher than the game expects. Perhaps if I'd fought Kurt Zisa much earlier, he would have been a lot harder. Problem is that it's almost impossible to know at which point you're over or underpowered at endgame. Bosses don't have star rankings or level recommendations, they're just there. Is it possible that I could have struggled more against the Phantom or the Ice Titan if I wasn't higher leveled from synthesis grinding? Maybe. Is it possible that I'm supposed to fight Sephiroth or the Enigmatic Man when I'm at level 100 and I've crafted the Ultima Keyblade? Maybe. It's hard to say for sure. Unfortunately, you're encouraged to grind here for synthesis materials, a process that's interesting at first, but grows incredibly repetitive incredibly quickly. In order to craft the ultimate weapons for Sora, Donald, and Goofy, you need to synthesize every item on the synthesis list at least once. You can get this material from normal enemies or secret chests, and a lot of these materials are gained through the main quest. Going back to explore the worlds is inevitable as you learn new colors of Trinity that allow you to gain more secrets that you couldn't get on your first visit, a lot like a Metroidvania backtracking system. It makes sense when paired with the new secret Heartless scattered across all the worlds. Kingdom Hearts 1 funnels you into revisiting each world after the final boss to get the most mileage out of every pixel. The secret Heartless are really unique too. I love figuring out how to reap the most rewards from them, and as you'd expect, they make cool use of the tech point system. The pink Agaricus revolves around the spell Stop, and counts as many hits as you could fit in while it's stopped. Tech points count up from 1 for each hit inflicted, which affects the percentage and rarity of the rewards it drops. In the HD remake, you need Serenity Power from this thing, and the drop rate is mighty low if you can't get to 100 hits. Now, this would be fine if you only needed 1 Serenity Power, but you need 7. The most I could manage is around 50 hits consistently, which gives about a 10 to 20% chance of it dropping a Serenity Power. That is remarkably low. You need 7. True, this is an optional side thing, the Ultima Keyblade isn't required, I get that. It's just that you can strike a much better balance. Instead of making you grind for a bunch of materials, why not heighten the challenge so that you only need 1 Serenity Power, but to get it, you must land 100 hits. It already feels good to figure out the best way to get those 100 hits, and it doesn't require that you have to grind for 7 of them every single playthrough, you only need the 1. Every secret Heartless is a test of strength anyway, so why not make it simpler? The Black Ballade are a test of your tracking skills. It's the classic minigame where you have to keep your eye on one of the Heartless and pick the correct one after they shuffle. Why do I have to play this minigame multiple times instead of just succeeding the one time? It's quite a difficult minigame, so it only makes sense that you'd get the Ultima Keyblade after a hard challenge, not after a hard challenge done 1,000,000 times over. The Grand Ghost only takes damage when giving it healing items. It's fun to figure out, but it isn't fun to leave the throat, enter the throat, do the platforming challenge, deposit items onto him, and repeat the cycle. Every secret Heartless needs to respawn, and in some cases they don't always respawn when you enter and exit the room. The pink Agaricus, for example, doesn't spawn 100% of the time. You have no idea how much time I spent running around this simple, maddening loop, finding all 3 of the stop mushrooms, spawning the pink Agaricus, trying the minigame, failing to get a Serenity Power, and doing it all over again. Why does it have to be this tedious? Why do I have to run in and out of this part of Halloween Town over and over again just so I can get another opportunity to fight the Chimera? I get that some of these Heartless aren't super special, more that they're just extra Heartless that operate normally, but maybe tying RNG drops to them isn't a smart move. Maybe tying anything more than temporary healing items and gummy blocks isn't a good idea because being forced to grind for anything, in my book, is incredibly boring. At least make it so that you need a lower amount of materials. My gosh, it feels like it took me years to acquire the Ultima Keyblade. Doesn't help that you're funneled into doing all this grinding after you've beaten the game, and only a fraction of this synthesis item gathering is done through the main quest's optional content. There's an alarming amount of required synthesis items solely from things you can only do at a certain point in the game, which does make sense. You don't want to give players the Ultima Keyblade too early on, but there must have been some way to eliminate the tedium. I guess that leaves me with the gummy ship segments. Oh, an odd thing to say for last, but you know, much like this game, I've grown fond of these little distractions over the years. I used to outright hate them, but could you blame me? I was never one to mess around with building new gummy ships, so I stuck with the default model through and through. I never saw these sections as anything more than slow-moving, boring Star Fox bootlegs. It sucks even more that they make you go through them at the beginning of the game before getting the warp drive. That's something that you should have definitely had from the beginning. Forcing you to do the same gummy ship segment over and over just to travel a long distance highlights how shallow the actual gummy ship combat is with the normal model. You have one pea shooter, you move slowly, you avoid a few obstacles, deal with a few harmless, directionless ships, you reach the world. They feel pointless until you start messing around with the gummy blocks in the workshop. That's when I realized why they were put in the game to begin with, and I'm more fond of them nowadays than I've ever been. There's a robust building block system for making new ships that reminds me of making my own LEGO creations once upon a time. Something about this block system turned me off as a kid, and to some extent as an adult, so I didn't touch the system in either game until very, very recently. What I ended up finding was my inner child, trying to create cool-looking ships by putting thrusters in the right places, using the blocks to make imaginative shapes to give me better speed or power, and that made going through some of the more difficult gummy ship missions a hell of a lot more fun. Instead of viewing each section as a formality, doing each section for fun with challenging mission objectives got me to smile a little bit. It's definitely no Star Fox, no sin and punishment, but it got a laugh out of me. Sometimes, and I think that's enough. That's Kingdom Hearts 1 and wait. You thought I'd forgotten about the music, didn't you? I wouldn't dare gloss over the work of my favorite composer, Yoko Shimomura. Truth be told, I prefer her work in the future games, so I won't dwell too long on this point, but come now, this music is top tier. She created 2 music tracks for each world. One is the main theme and one is the battle theme for that world. Nobuo Uematsu is great and all, but having more than one battle theme makes them each stand out more. As iconic as the Final Fantasy battle themes are, having only one for each game can become tiring, especially thanks to the somewhat high random encounter rates. Pair this with the excellent opening theme, Simple and Clean by Utada Hikaru, and you've got yourself a neat soundtrack. Not nearly as good as the rest of the series, but oh well, this was still the game to introduce dearly beloved Hollow Bastion. And dive into the heart. I'd say that's a win. That's Kingdom Hearts 1 in a nutshell. It makes me happy. Having grown up with the second game, going back to this slower, more archaic combat system felt really weird, to the point where I'd focus solely on the slower combat and nothing else. I didn't think about the story or the level design or anything else. I was just stuck on this slower, more primitive combat. Now, as an adult with changing taste, more appreciation for the series as a whole, I get a lot out of Kingdom Hearts 1. As the first attempt at making a Final Fantasy action RPG, it did a great job nailing the most crucial aspects of its design. For every bad boss, there are 2 great ones. For every moment you're mashing the X button, there's a magic spell or Disney summon to spice up the combat. For every boring gummy ship mission, there's a harder variant you can test out with your new built-from-scratch ship. Kingdom Hearts is about give and take. And for me, there's a lot of fun ripe for the taking. As for the video at hand, if you enjoyed it, like it, I guess. You know what? I really don't care. Comment down below because I love hearing your thoughts. I really don't care what else you do. I mean, you can dislike it if you didn't like it, but just tell me why. That's the caveat. If you liked it, tell me why. If you disliked it, tell me why. I just want to know. I want to know what you feel about Kingdom Hearts. I want to feel your wavelength. I want to be on the same wavelength. Let me connect with you. And don't be an asshole about it, alright? I'm watching you. If you like this video and want to support me, I have a Patreon. I'm not going to force you to donate, but it would be very helpful. People ask all the time what's the best way to support me, and Patreon is definitely it. YouTube ad revenue is not fun to rely on, I'll just say that. That about does it, really. So, I guess, yeah, I usually don't do these unscripted, so this probably sounds a little weird. My name has been King K, and I certainly hope you have yourself a well-deserved cup of BK Joe today.